and welcome to The Bulk. Today we're looking at Ant-Man and the Wasp. The film is directed by Peyton Reed and follows the Ant-Man Scott Lang as he comes to the end of his term under house arrest and has to try and help Hank Pym and his daughter Hope rescue the original Wasp from the quantum realm. So what's good about the film? Well, the leading duo, played by Paul Rudd and oh god, what's her name? I can never pronounce her name, but anyway, the leading duo of the Wasp and Ant-Man are played very well indeed. Both take on the role quite well. They allow the characters to come through properly. Both balance the humour quite well, especially Rudd, because he gets a lot of the humour and he does get more. I feel he gets more screen time than Hope, and he balances it quite well. He's got natural charisma in this role, especially with his daughter. That relationship arc is built up very well between the two, and the relationship between Ant-Man and the Wasp sort of develops quite naturally. Ultimately, there is a romance element to it, and the film doesn't hammer it home. It allows it to sort of feed its way into the story quite well. Moving on to the story, in fact, I believe that the story and script of this have been very well written and very tightly written. The story itself is very well structured, it moves along at sort of a different type of pace and setting than other Marvel films, and how events play out is very well plotted and placed together. It doesn't go the way that most things would. It's more of a caper film, like a crime caper, rather than a heist film like the previous film, and does feel rather different than previous other Marvel movies, and a lot more light-hearted and small scale, which is what I think we need after the weight of Black Panther and Infinity War. You know, we could do something a little bit more focused, a little smaller, a bit more humorous to sort of take the edge off. I must admit, though, the film is also very well directed. I think Reed does a brilliant job at sort of the visual humour. He has a lot of there's a lot of images in it that are very humorous, and he also balances the powers quite well and has fun exploring the powers and putting them on display very well. I think he balances a lot of sequences quite well, so its action is quite fast paced and intense, while the lighter moments come across quite as well as good. Sort of similarly. Time's another big thing with Marvel movies, and the always talk comes to the villain, because Marvel has had a villain problem. Though recently they've been doing better with Vulture, with Ego, Killmonger, Thanos. They've had a better run of it, and with Ghost, I think they've had. They've sort of taken another positive step toward fixing the problem. She was a very well developed character. You gained to feel for her. You understood what was going on, and she's not a straightforward villain. This is one of the most morally ambiguous characters that they've had. Her powers are very well depicted. The visuals for that are very interesting, and she gets a lot of fun sequences. The suit design is very good as well. Also, she's very well acted. I must admit, the actress who plays does a damn good job of coming across the certain bits you need to do, because there are certain elements of a character that the trailers don't address and the marketing never doesn't touch at all, that when you actually see her in display, you it changes your perspective, because you think it may be always straightforward, villain wants to destroy the world, blah blah blah, but it doesn't play out like that at all. This kind of is where the negatives come in, though, with the characters, because I do feel that perhaps she is a little underserved. Granted, she does get quite a bit of screen time, but not as much as I would have liked. And when it comes to her being developed, she gets one massive exposition-y scene, which I didn't mind, but did come across. But I was a bit annoyed by that they lumped her with this massive dollop of exposition and it kind of feed through the narrative naturally. She has got an interesting motivation and so forth, but a lot of the dialogue she was given didn't really go into it well, and the actress is doing a good job, but not as well as some of the dialogue may have needed. In terms of dialogue itself, even though I do think the script is well written, I think that some dialogue is a little wonky. It's very tonally mishmash, because you go from these sci-fi concept heavy dialogue scenes to having some comedic scenes, and it's very back and forth. And while a lot of it works, it does lose its way at times, especially when it comes to like scenes when you've got like something like Hank Pym's discussing something and then jumping to Antman discussing something, and it kind of doesn't really flow that well. And again, exposition heavy scenes do happen, not often mind you, but they do happen. And generally I kind of felt like the dialogue itself could have been like a little bit more like sort of threaded, and especially it's very on the nose. I feel like sort of it states things a lot, and a lot of new in concepts. It's very like it has to state what they are, and it doesn't overly hit for me. For instance, like you can tell when the problem comes into effect because some characters seem to have problem delivering these elements. Overall, I feel that the film itself is very good. I think it's one of Marvel's more watchable ones. That's not a comment on some of the films, that's not a comment on any of the quality of the films, it's more of a point I feel this one's more rewatchable, because there's just a light longevity to it that works, the characters are interesting, the story's not too complex, and it all kind of threads together quite well. I do think it's not perfect, it's a bit small scale, a little bit, sometimes it's a bit too on the nose, but overall it's a very fun and enjoyable film with two very like watchable lead characters and a very good villain, so I'm going to give the film an 8 out of 10. The film, directed by John Turteltaub, follows Jonas, a former rescue diver who, following a traumatic event, has to save his estranged ex-wife from a mysterious creature deep beneath the sea. So, what's good about the film? Well, I think the big thing I have to start with is the obvious comparison being that to Rampage, the Dwayne Johnson giant monster movie from earlier this year. Because it's very easy to compare the two, you know, big name lead, giant monsters, a bit of a silly concept, you know. But whereas that film was entertaining from a more of a so bad it's good point of view, with some of the scenes being like a bit weird and sort of it being a very weird mishmash of things and lack of depth and all that MacGuffin, this film I feel is entertaining because it has been well crafted to be that way. The film doesn't take itself completely seriously, and has fun with the concept, but never feels like it's spoofing the genre or spoofing the source material, and kind of, it uses the base plot of the novel, though a very, very, very basic version of the novel's plot, to give itself a more sort of emotive and like investable plot to work off having great elements of like fun, humour, action and so forth. The dialogue is very well constructed, all the characters feel like interesting and sort of feel watchable and very likeable characters. The film never is pushing, it's not pushing any of that pseudoscience bollocks that some of these monster movies do, or particularly weird, like sort of big fun action movies do. It always like the logic in the film is like, kind of, it does ever so slightly push your suspension of disbelief, but never so much that it takes you out of it, and you sort of be settled in the moment. The acting is kind of supplements this with every single person involved understanding the material and work and sort of using their talent to make it sort of sell it to you. Jason Statham's got natural charisma and he handles a lot of the stuff well. He's never given any big stupid dialogue sequences like explaining stuff, and he's never given any like stupid thing about like philosophical comments. He's just given the like what an actual character would be in that situation, and along with most of the characters, they never throw stupid like ideas at him. They never deal with like stupid arguments or anything like that, and even though the plot and some of the characters are a little bit routine, it never feels generic, it never feels empty-headed. It always feels like it's been purposely built that way, but for the good reasons. And because it's easy enough to say, when you say a movie's self-aware, it's easy enough to use that term to sort of point out it's being a bit lazy, but nothing about this feels lazy. Everything feels well done. A lot of the film takes place underwater, and it's also a very personal film. Like with a lot of these giant monster movies, the military gets involved and there's massive destruction, and while that is the case in terms of like the destruction part of view, it never gets too big, like, so to speak. It's always very contained. It's about these characters trying to deal with the giant shark rather than other people trying to come into it. And while the shark does, of course, cause chaos for the public. It never becomes like a massive issue, and it always remains very self-contained. And that also means when deaths occur, they are shocking, and a lot of the deaths are very well thought out in that they emphasise the shock value of it, because the film's not violent, but I feel it doesn't necessarily need it. In terms of visuals, the CGI is very good for this type of film. They use the shark just enough that you feel you're getting your money's worth, but never too much that you realise how crap the CGI is. And even then, the CGI is not that bad. Again, a lot of this, like the set design and the cinematography, is bright and it's colourful and it's unique, allowing more enjoyment value and allowing you to sort of get more comfortable in the world of this film. And I must admit, Terrell Tubb is very good at creating good tension out of the sequence. I did feel rather tense at some points, because it's not just Jason Statham facing the shark. It's always him rescuing, like, say for instance, him rescuing from somebody from the shark, somebody else falling in the water, something else is going on. There's always multiple strands that sort of interlink and cause problems for each other, and it creates a great sense of tension, and it keeps you sort of built up on that sense. And also the film gets into it very quickly, like from the sort of get-go. There's a lot, like there's stuff for you to get into, and I feel Terrell Tubb as a director, he handles the concepts, the actors, the action very competently, and proves that he's good at these type of summer movie things. Having previously done the National Treasure movies, this sort of builds upon that rapport that he can actually handle this material quite well. If I'm going to get into problems for this film, I'm going to have to be open with you and say that there is a very big lack of depth. There's a lot of interesting character sort of faults and things that sort of are suggested. Jonas is trauma, they kind of suggest he has PTSD and fears the water, and there's a lot of problems with him, and they try to suggest other things about other characters, but they never quite develop those elements as much, and it does lack the depth of the novel dealing with a lot of more sci-fi concepts and some other more personal problems, but in the sense, you could argue that it doesn't really need it. The film does get ever so slightly too ridiculous at points, specifically at the end, during the final confrontation. There is a moment that is a little bit woo, but everything else is sort of it tries to keep that thing. In terms of the argument of R-rated versus PG, I do feel this film may have benefited from a little more violence, in my personal opinion, especially during the beach scene. It could have done with a bit more blood-filled carnage. And I know they did film R-rated scenes, some that actually sounded quite visually interesting, but it's very arguable, because R-rating could have made this more gratuitous, and I feel that it's just the right level of stupid without feeling too empty-minded. Overall, the film is very, very enjoyable. It's the definition of a summer blockbuster. Probably one that's going to get sadly snubbed by a lot of people because of the ridiculousness of the whole thing. But if I were you, I would go out and watch it. It's a really fun film to watch with an audience. I watched it with a very packed audience, and everybody enjoyed it. It's good for a family as well. It never gets too violent. There's never too much of anything really to sort of ruin elements, sort of ruin the viewing experience for family. I had a lot of fun with it. I think that it's one of the better summer movies I've seen this year. I wouldn't say it's going to be in my top 10, but I must admit it's one of those films that I enjoyed watching the most this year, and for that reason I'm going to give the film a 7 out of 10. So, that's the end of the video. Thank you for watching. Have you seen The Meg? Do you think more big-name stars should be fighting giant monsters in films? Please let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll be seeing you next time. Goodbye!